Resilience Task Force. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. It's great to see you all. I want to introduce myself first. My name is Melanie Del Rosario. I am a facilitator with Triangle Associates, and I will be the task force facilitator over the next year or so that we will all be working together. Triangle Associates is a consulting firm. We specialize in collaborative decision making. We have offices in Bellingham, also in Seattle and Eastern Washington and Portland, and we work throughout the Pacific Northwest. I live in Bellingham and I work out of the Bellingham office. I work on other projects throughout the county, mostly focused on natural resource topics. And I am really, really looking forward to working with this group and facilitating this group. I'm going to pass the mic off to my other colleague, who you've likely seen in your inboxes from Triangle. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Kate.
Hi, folks. My name is Kate Galambos, and I am also with Triangle Associates supporting Melanie on this project. I also live in Bellingham and work out of our Bellingham office, and I'm really excited to support this work as someone who's lived and worked in Whatcom County for about 10 years. Like Melanie, I support other natural resource projects in Whatcom County and beyond. And yeah, I'm just really glad to be here with you all. Like Melanie said, you all have probably heard from me and seen my name in your inbox, and that'll continue to be the case. My project role will be your lead point of contact, especially with questions about scheduling or technology. Please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. So there are two other members of our consultant team from Triangle who you may see at future meetings or hear from outside of these meetings. So I wanted to at least share their names, even if you can't see their faces. So Joy Juleson and Dave Peterson. Joy is a director at Triangle. She has a lot of experience leading collaborative processes and developing long-term strategies. So she'll be providing some strategic process guidance throughout this. And then Dave is a professor of forest ecology at the University of Washington, and he's going to be supporting the data collection and development of the plan as we move things along. So wanted to share their names, and you'll meet them likely at future meetings. I want to pass the introduction baton over to folks from Whatcom County who are working behind the scenes on this project. So Chris, if you could introduce yourself, and then Kathy.
Hey everyone, good to see a lot of y'all today. My name is Chris Elder. I'm a senior planner in watershed management for Whatcom County Public Works, and I've been with the county for a little over a decade now and worked with most of you in various capacities. So good to see everyone and excited to launch down this road. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Hulk. I'm the clerk of the council, and I'm here just representing the council. This is their project, which was adopted by ordinance into the county code. And the council and our office really appreciates you all for participating in this project. So thanks for being here.
Thank you both. So I'd like to give all of the task force members a chance to introduce yourselves. And we've got, about 8 minutes or so. So try to keep it to about a minute. But in that time, I would like you to share your name. If you are a permanent member, please share the agency you're representing. And if you're an appointed member, share your area of expertise. And then also in a sentence or two, please share what inspired or motivated you to join the task force. So I'll go through that again, your name, and then either the agency you're representing or your area of expertise, and then what inspired or motivated you to join the task force. And I will just go down my list in order. So I'll queue you up. I'll say, I'm just looking, I've got Barry, then Carl, and then David. And then I'll cue the next 3 after David. Thanks for putting that in the chat, Kate. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen just so we can see everybody, and then I'll reshare once we get through. So Barry, you are up first.
Okay, thanks you, Melanie. I'm Barry Wenger. I'm retired from the Washington State Department of College as a senior planner, about 50 years in environmental analysis, shoreline and land use expertise. I do just, well, consulting somewhat now, but it's mostly guidance for nonprofits and other people that are interested in protecting the environment, which is now my hobby, really. And so I find myself just following some of the bigger issues like climate change and sea level rise, which I worked in, but also on smaller projects that might have a serious impact to their community, like the ABC recycling fiasco. Anyway, and I just love nature, and I'm just a tree hugger from birth, and I think it's so important to make sure that we keep our ecosystem intact, both for biodiversity, but just for all the other reasons that you all know, water control, purity, and resistance to climate change. So I'm also long-winded, so that's it.
Thank you, Barry. Carl, then David.
Good morning, Carl Weimer. I spent 12 years on the Whatcom County Council, but for this task force, I'm a member of the Whatcom County Parks and Recreation Commission. That's who I'm representing on the task force. I'm on a variety of other boards and advisory committees, so I bring some of that to it. And I guess the passion for why I raised my hand to be the member for the Parks Commission was being on the Parks Commission and then being on the council beforehand. I have a real passion for all the different resource land issues in the county. And on the Parks Commission in particular, we keep running into conflicts between more recreation and better protection of our resource land. So that's what I hope to represent.
Thank you, Carl. David?
Melanie, before David goes, I forgot to say that I'm the representative from the county's Wildlife Committee.
Thank you, Barry.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thanks for adding that. Go ahead, David.
Hi, I'm David, David Wallen. I formerly was a faculty member in the Department of Forest Science at Oregon State University. And for the past 29 years, I've been a faculty member in the Department of Environmental Sciences here at Western. I'm a forest ecologist, have been involved in a variety of forest management issues as well as wildlife management issues. And among other things, I was actively involved in the sort of 10-year-long effort, the reconveyance effort to reconvey DNR land to Whatcom County for creating the park. So,
Thank you, David.
mm-hmm.
Next, we've got Chris, Corey, then Ellen. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right. So hi, I'm Chris Henke. I'm actually traveling, so I'm on just for a short time, and I look forward to many more meetings to get properly caught up here. So I'm work for the Department of Natural Resources. I'm our Baker District Manager. So I'm responsible for the DNR lands in Whatcom County and Northern Skagit County, like something like 126,000 acres. I have a timber sale program and a recreation program, and I look forward to engaging with the task force.
Thank you, Chris. Corey?
Corey, it looks like you're on mute.
Managed to get the microphone going, not the camera, but not the microphone. I'm Corey McDonald. I'm the proprietary forester with Department of Natural Resources. I work down in Cedro-Woolley with Chris Henke, and then I'm on the committee because I'm also on the Whatcom Forest Advisory Committee for forestry. And yeah, I'm just excited. I'm super passionate about forestry, and so just happy to participate.
Thank you, Corey. Thanks for being here. Ellen?
Hi, I'm Ellen Murphy. I I have a master's in forestry and worked as a reforestation forester for a commercial company Then I spent most of my career at Pacific Northwest National Lab as a hydrologist. My PhD is in hydrology, and then 6 years on the Climate Impact Advisory Committee, most recently. My interest is really sustainable rotations and really watershed and water supply. And that's why I'm on this committee.
Thank you, Ellen. So next we'll have Jim, Kevin, then Oliver. Go ahead, Jim.
Jim Hansen. I'm a representative of Whatcom County Planning Commission. I had a long career that included several years of being a forestry and reforestation contractor. I worked and I managed the salmon habitat restoration program for Lummi Nation for 15 years. And within that context, well, within the first context, I personally planted over 750,000 trees. Within this, and then working for Lummi, as part of our program, we had riparian forestry restoration and general forestry restoration, trying to take something that had been a managed stand and turn it back into a natural stand. I'm not a tree hugger, but I would like to see a canopy expansion to curtail the contraction we have right now. And I'd like to see a report that isn't just something that's put on the shelf. I'd like to see a report that motivates changes in our critical areas and our comprehensive plan, so that we can better protect our canopy and expand the canopy. And there's a bunch of stuff we need, especially we're going to need enforcement. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Jim. Kevin?
Hi there, Kevin James. I'm with the U.S. Forest Service. I split my time between being the area ecologist for Western Washington, which encapsulates the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest, the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, as well as the Olympic National Forest. And I'm also the forest botanist for the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. And I also serve as the climate change coordinator for the forest as well. And I do live in Bellingham, which is a nice bonus. And then thinking about, Forest Service land in Western Washington, we typically manage more in the headwaters. So this is a unique opportunity to help affect change all the way from the crests of the Cascades down to the coast. And just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So we've got Oliver, then Russ, then Tracy.
Good day, everyone. I'm Oliver Graw, and I'm recently retired from the Nooksack Indian Tribe, where I served as the Water Resource Program Manager. And there, over my 11-year tenure with the tribe, I developed and managed the tribe's climate change resilience adaptation project. That project took the lead in evaluating the effect of commercial forestry in the Nooksack watershed. I cut my professional career, or cut my teeth on my professional career in forest management. That went into watershed management with a MS degree in watershed science. Was an environmental consultant for 30 years, had my own consulting company. Then moved to San Juan Island, temporarily semi-retiring, but was involved there on the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment for San Juan County. Moved to Bellingham and worked for various consulting firms, mostly down in Seattle and Everett, and then took a job with Whatcom County Planning and Development Services. And most recently there, I was the Natural Resources Manager for Planning and Development Services. Worked for about 1.5 years down in Corvallis for the Institute for Applied Ecology as their restoration director, and then moved back up to Bellingham, and where I took the job with the Nooksack Indian Tribe. I'm most passionate about, in terms of this realm, the cumulative effect of current forest management on watershed function. And that involves looking at past, present, and reasonably foreseeable actions in forestry, but other land uses in the watershed, combined with climate change to look at the effect of all those together on water resources, and hopefully make strong recommendations on how forest management could be a little bit more progressive in regard to promoting more stream flow late in the summer and reducing stream temperatures late in the summer, not just from a forest management standpoint, but also from a climate change standpoint. So I'm looking at forest resilience from a adaptation resilience perspective. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on this task force.
Thank you, Oliver. Russ?
Yes, Russ Pfeiffer Hoyt, and I'm president of the Mount Baker School Board. I've been on the school board for over 24 years. Mount Baker School District is the largest local recipient of DNR managed trust revenue in Whatcom County. I also serve on the Washington State Carbon and Forest Management Work Group and the Washington Forest Wildland Fire Advisory Committee. The Forest Management Work Group is doing modeling of forest management scenarios for all of Western Washington DNR managed lands, including the impact of climate change on forest management. And so I think some of the work that we're doing at the state level will be very helpful to inform some of the local county work. Why I wanted to serve, I wanted to represent my position on the task force is to represent the trust beneficiaries, and so that's my primary motivation. Also, I've served for over 30 years for Whatcom County Fire District 16 as a volunteer firefighter, so I have a lot of experience in the concerns concerning the wildland urban interface for fire. So that's another big concern I have.
Thank you, Russ. Tracy?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Tracy Petrosky, and I'm here representing also with Corey McDonald. We're both representatives for the Forest Advisory Committee that for Whatcom County. My job is actually the Forest Certification Program Manager for DNR. So my role here is not as a DNR representative, that falls to Chris, but and again, so I'm representing the FAC. And part of why I wanted to be here is, as a resident of kind of rural Whatcom County too, is being involved in the forest management. And, regarding the forest certification, and part of my job there is really combining like all of the different elements of certification, not just like healthy forest, sustainable forest management and actually keeping forests as working forests, but at the same time, looking at all the ecological objectives, really like what are we doing for water quantity and quality, as well as all the social elements. Are we looking at tribal collaborations and considerations? Are we looking at multi-use and recreation? So forest certification is this really broad thing that puts together, I think, everything the Resilience Task Force is wanting to encompass. So yeah, and I really, as far as the inspiration is just, I'm a resident here. I live in forested land. I look at forested land and I want to be involved in what our decision making is down the road. So
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, everybody. Are there any task force members who did not introduce themselves? All right. Well, thank you all. It's great to hear a little bit more about you. And
Oh, Melanie, you dropped onto mute somehow.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. I'm going to move us along to talking through our agenda for the meeting, and I'm going to reshare my screen. I apologize, this is slightly different than what you have in your meeting packet, but it's not drastic, so hopefully that's all right with everybody. So we're going to spend some time talking about the orientation of the task force and the formation, and we'll review the code. And then we will review and adopt the rules and procedure following that. Then we will conduct the important business of electing a task force chair. So that is the switch. We switched reviewing the rules and procedure with electing the task force chair. So everything else from here on forward is the same as what's in your packet. We'll spend some time reviewing our draft work plan schedule. Then we will we'll discuss our path forward. We will have time for public comment at 12:15. And then we will spend just 5 minutes wrapping and talking about our next steps and doing a quick little preview for our next meeting. And then we will wrap up promptly at 12:30. Any questions or comments on the agenda?
Excuse me, I had one question. Excuse me, if I counted properly on the document you sent out ahead of time, there's supposed to be 19 members on this committee, and maybe I counted wrong, but I only got 13 people here. Or did I miss somebody?
That's correct. So we have 2 vacant seats.
Okay.
So that's part of that. And then there were someone had a last minute conflict who was planning on attending and unfortunately had to head out of town. And then we have 1 member who's on leave until mid-August, and so won't be able to join us until mid-August. And then we had 1 other person who had a teaching obligation and wasn't able to attend.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, and then just a note for all of you, I really appreciate your flexibility. I know that this date was chosen, and one of the things we'll talk about as before our next meeting is reaching out with a survey to get all of your availability to make sure that we're prioritizing the date that works for as many of you as possible. Just noting that this is a pretty large group that may not always be possible, but we promise to do our best. And so one of the things we'll do after this first meeting is get at least through the end of the year a better handle on everyone's schedule so that we can find a date that works for as many people as possible. Jim, I see your hand.
Yeah, just to help me focus in better, are we going to be only dealing with commercial forestry issues, or is it a broader scope where we could talk about reforesting vast tracts of previously cleared rural land to create additional canopy?
I love it. Jim's ready to get right into the work. We are going to review a little bit more about our scope as it's laid out in the code right after I get through some of the agenda and ground rules. So we're headed right there, Jim. Any other questions on the agenda? Okay, great. So I do have some ground rules for us, just to make sure that we are, functioning really efficiently and that everyone is under agreement on how we will be interacting as a group. So as a facilitator, these are my proposed ground rules, but I certainly welcome others. But I'll go through what I have laid out. So the first is to minimize distractions, recognizing that we're meeting in a virtual format. This can be a challenge at times. So I ask you to try to close out of your Outlook or your Gmail or whatever and really focus in on us while we're meeting and be as engaged as possible. The other is to please do share your ideas and opinions when we ask that you just do that respectfully. And then the flip side of that is to really listen actively to other ideas and opinions and really strive to understand what people are sharing. The third is to raise your hand. Thank you, Jim, for modeling that. I really appreciate raising your hand. And if you're not familiar with the Zoom interface, it's right at the bottom of your screen in the taskbar. It says raise hand. And then also try to remember to lower it as well. The fifth is to tackle problems, not people, right? So try to focus on the issues and not the people specifically. And then the last one that I proposed is to share the air. So if you're someone who's typically, really comfortable speaking, that's great. And I really encourage you to do so, but maybe also try to remember to step back now and then and make sure that others have a chance to share their ideas and opinions as well. Does anyone have any other ground rules that they'd like to add? All right, and so just to practice the little virtual voting procedures, if you can agree to these ground rules, we don't have a thumbs up. I don't think we have that capability. So we're going to use the hand raise for that, and then we can all practice raising our hand too. So if you agree to these ground rules, can you raise a hand? I think I see everybody. Barry, Ellen, these sound good to you? Ellen, I see. And Barry, you might be on my screen twice. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Go ahead and lower your hand. And we are going to move into spending some time reviewing the code that established this task force. So this is on page 2 of your packet, if you have it in front of you. I don't have everything up on the screen. I just want to narrow our focus into a few key pieces. So the first thing that I pulled up on the screen is the purpose. So this is our what. This is what everybody here on this task force is gathered to do. And that is to develop a comprehensive Whatcom County Forest Resilience Plan, right? So that at the end of this process, this is what we will have created collectively as a group. And this will include a framework for engagement with local, state, federal, and tribal governments and relevant stakeholders on issues relating to forest management and resilience. So that is the purpose, that is the what. The function, which gets into a little bit more detail. And I'm usually not a big fan of putting so much text on a screen, but I think it's important that we all take the time to read this. So I'm going to give you all a moment to either read over this in the packet that you have, or if you have a screen that this text is large enough to read, then go ahead and read it on the screen, and I'll just give you a minute or two. Oliver, yes, I see your hand.
Yeah, in terms of function, I know that the primary focus is on forest management, probably in the commercial forestry areas, but I'm hoping that given these definitions and identification of function, that we will also be addressing the issue of loss of forest cover within the various city jurisdictions, because that ends up being a fairly large area of forest. And one of the, maybe I'm getting too much detail now, but one of my interests would be the apparent contradiction of, say, the city of Bellingham's urban forestry plan with development regulations. They seem to be at odds with each other. And I think from a forest resilience standpoint, and since Bellingham is in Whatcom County, it would be within the purview of our technical involvement. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Oliver. So I'm hearing an interest of yours is to focus on forest cover in the city of Bellingham specifically. And this is it's helpful to hear these ideas, and this is something we'll know and we'll get into a lot more at our next meeting when we start talking about goals. And I'll cue that up a little bit later on in this meeting as well. So thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about either the purpose or the function? Yes, Carl. Oh, Carl, you're on mute.
You think 4 years into Zoom, you could learn such things.
You know, it's not a meeting until someone's talked while on mute.
I notice we have all these actions we're supposed to be working at, like, you know, sustaining a thriving timber economy. Are at some point we going to try to define what those mean? Because I would guess people don't agree whether we even have a thriving timber economy or not at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you use the word actions, Carl, and we'll get into you know, the bigger picture thinking, and then as we start to narrow our focus, that's when when these, which I would call more goals, will turn into more specific actions. But to your point, we need to clearly define the goals and come to agreement on that, right? Which would be sort of a discussion about what the challenges and threats are. So we will get there, absolutely.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments about the purpose and function or other aspects of the code? I highlighted these because, you know, this is, in my mind, the key what and the how. But any other questions or comments folks had on the code? Yes, Jim.
Well, it's a little confusing to me is first they talk about publicly owned forests and plans and management, et cetera, but then it talks about review relevant county policies, programs, et cetera. And I'm thinking, does privately owned forest land fall through the cracks here? Because that's DNR jurisdiction. And that might be significant that we address those as well.
I don't see specific guidance on public versus private, and that's something we can flag for discussion as we move forward in defining our goals. So that's a great comment, Jim. Tracy, another question or maybe a response?
A quick response. Jim, you said one thing that I just want to clarify what you were thinking. I think that you said that DNR is privately owned land, and I could be that I mistook.
DNR manages regulates privately owned land.
I'll let maybe if Chris Hankey needs to pipe in on any of that. I was just kind of clarifying what the verbiage and thinking. So I also agree that, yeah, it would seem that in a forest resilience task force goal, that I would also think that we are looking at a comprehensive view of all land management and how do those pieces fit together so we don't have this checkerboard management thing. So I'm in agreement with you. I just wanted to know what your thinking was on that. Thanks.
And I'll just add that a key piece of this as laid out in the code is this coordination piece, right? Local, state, federal, and tribal governments so to your point about rather than the checkerboard approach. Corey, go ahead.
Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted, but your video went off. I don't know if you intended that.
Yeah, there. Is that working?
Yes, we see you and hear you.
I got like 3 screens. They just set it all up today. I'm kind of lost. So yeah, that's one of the things that I've been a little puzzled. And I think that's one of the things I need clarification on, and just to figure out kind of what the plan will do. And I think we need to understand what sort of what the capabilities or what the utility of the plan would be, because if it's, you know, a list of recommendations to encourage certain practices or whatever, that's one thing. But I think it's important to recognize that like private forestry is subject to the State Forest Practices Act. And so this plan, you know, whatever recommendations we all come up with would really be done by voluntary measures by forest landowners. DNR is not able to enforce anything over and above the forest practice regulations, which is really true for state land management as well. Although the Board of Natural Resources, which directs land management on state trust lands, could be influenced and interested in adopting some of the recommendations, if not, you know, all of them. So just wanted to clarify that. And then also, it's sort of a question that I have in my mind is exactly what, you know, how this plan would actually come into play as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's a good point, Corey, about implementation and voluntary versus what's, you know, more specifically laid out in statute. Oliver?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the previous comment. I will just add that our product or our plan will obviously be advisory, and there's no reason why we can't bring our findings and recommendations to the attention of the Forest Practices Board to try to facilitate or enact change in the Forest Practices Act. And that's one of my comments, that the Forest Practices Act or forest management in Washington has come a huge way, say from the 60s and 70s. However, there's this assumption that the current regulations are effective at avoiding impacts to water resources and other important resources to humans. And that assumption may not be valid, particularly in the face of climate change. So what I'd like at least to point out again, that there's no reason why we can't frame up some of our findings and recommendations to assist the Forest Practices Board in possibly enacting change. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Do we have time for one more question or a comment before I move us forward? And Corey and Oliver, I think those are hands that were already addressed, but if you have something else to add. Thank you. That's great. Barry.
Yeah, this is just a quick observation. I think if you look at the whole body of what's written here, it's really clear, and I think from everyone's comments so far, that we're looking at a healthy forest ecosystem. And that includes more than private, and that's private, public, that's all the land. That's the whole scientific realm, basically. And so, and I think what the point of doing it this way is of focusing on trying to come up with some issue or goals and plans for publicly owned forests, is it kind of takes the heat off of private owners in this first effort. But the kind of things that like Oliver's talking about, I totally support. I think we should be looking at, you know, overall change, how to manage the entire ecosystem and the forested ecosystem, including, you know, repairing old areas like they've been farmed that shouldn't have been farmed, and then looking at how this applies to public owned forests. That gives us a good structure to then potentially, or the county or cities could even then look at it for their own goals, policies, and regulations.
Thank you, Barry. Jim, do you want to respond to that? And then I'm going to
just real quick. We need to think. I have much more faith in how forestry is managed than in our controls on land clearing. I think that we also should be looking at regulations in terms of people who want to clear existing canopy.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. The final piece of the code that I really wanted to highlight was our when. So we have a lot to do in a relatively short amount of time. So our deadline for submitting the plan to County Council is September 30th of 2025. So just over a year from now. And that year can go pretty quickly. So I want to make sure that that was on everybody's radar. And now I'm getting ahead. So any other questions before I move us into discussing the rules and procedures? Yes, Carl.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that we're going to draft this report with recommendations in it. In that report will go to the county council. We won't be making recommendations directly to other entities like DNR or the city of Bellingham. Is that correct?
So this, our final deliverable is, let me go back to this, is the plan to county council. However, as part of this plan, and we'll establish our goals more specifically, but this framework for engagement and coordination with local, state, federal, and tribal governments and relevant stakeholders. And my interpretation of that is that there would be recommendations for various local government entities as part of this plan. Does that answer your question, Carl?
Yeah, I wasn't clear on what engagement, if that meant just including them and as we're making recommendations or making recommendations directly to other entities.
Mm-hmm. And we can talk more about this as we go through our goals and how we see this collectively. I don't want to be, I don't want to speak for the group. However, my interpretation of that is that would include suggestions on how groups are working together, right, towards this common goal of, I'll just say, overall goal of resilience. Any other final thoughts? Okay. Thank you all so much for sharing your insights and asking good questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen while we move to reviewing the rules and procedures. Does everybody have access to the packet? It starts on page 6 of your packet. If you'd like me to pull it up on the screen, I can. If anyone just, if you'd like me to do that, go ahead and come off mute and say the word. But if you have it in front of you, that's great. And hopefully maybe some of you took some time to review this ahead of time. And I'd just like to ask if anyone has any comments, questions, or proposed edits to these draft rules and procedures. Yes, Carl.
Yeah, I found one thing that seems to be a conflict depending on what we do, and it's just under subcommittee participation. It says members shall participate in at least one subcommittee should subcommittees be formed. But then later on, it talks about how you can't have a subcommittee that includes a quorum of the whole task force. Well, there's a little conflict there because if we only create one subcommittee, according to this first statement, everybody would have to be on it if we all had to be part of a subcommittee. So we'd be over a quorum. So there's a conflict in how we're dealing with subcommittees.
So Carl, perhaps some language specifying that in the case of more than one subcommittee, everyone would be required to participate. Does that alleviate that concern? Just because as long as there's more than one, as long as there's at least two, that would alleviate that problem.
Yep, I think that takes away the conflict.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. So I'll have Kate note that change. And Tracy in the chat appreciates the attention to detail, as do I. Russ, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see the value in requiring each member to participate in subcommittee. I'd rather have subcommittees be formed by those who are either, most capable in that particular subject and not worry if everyone is on some subcommittee or not. I think that's kind of superfluous.
Thanks for sharing that, Russ. I hear that concern. I think the goal is to make sure that we're getting active participation, as a lot of the work will take place in subcommittees, and we want to make sure that voices are heard and that people are actively participating. Is your concern that mandatory participation might I guess force people into roles that they don't have interest or expertise?
Yeah, possibly, although I think that I presume that subcommittee work would then be brought forward to the committee as a whole. And
Mhm.
so in that way, all of the subcommittee work would be reviewed by the committee of the whole. So I think I don't want to make subcommittees more awkward than they would actually need to be.
Mhm.
More streamline their work.
Mhm. I hear that. Oliver, do you have a different question, or do you have a response to this topic?
I have a slightly different question, I think.
Okay. Okay. Russ, do you have, or Chris, perhaps you have a suggestion or a response to this concern?
Yeah, I mean, I think Russ's point is well taken, and I don't. I mean, even if you just changed it to members should participate, then that makes it a little bit more flexible, and I'm comfortable with that change.
Okay. Does that work for you, Russ, if we just change the language to allow some flexibility? Okay.
That works fine.
Should instead of shall. Okay. We'll note that change as well. Thank you, Russ. Okay, so go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you. At what point in time will the scope of a subcommittee be identified, including what are the subcommittees? I'm assuming that that's some work that needs to be done here shortly. I'm looking at the rules and procedures, and subcommittee topics aren't identified. So I assume that's for the next meeting or something?
Yes, that's exactly the focus for the next meeting. So we'll do the work of forming our goals collectively, and the subcommittees will be based on those collectively formed goals. And that's the priority for our next meeting. Jim?
Are we really going to have Robert's Rules of Order or some informal version? For instance, are we going to be calling for the question before we take a vote on a motion? Are there going to be various privileged motions that take precedent, that sort of things? It's a whole complex thing, and I just want to know. I would assume it's going to be more informal than that, but you might say modified Robert's rules or something if you aren't going to really do.
You went on mute just a little bit at the end, but yes, I appreciate that. And that's exactly the vision that I had, was a slightly less formal modified Robert's Rules of Order. But we do need, for example, when we move into our next order of business of electing the chair, we'd like to have a nomination. And then we have clear guidance in here about what constitutes a passing vote, for example. But I think we can be a little less strict about clear, specific to Robert's Rules of Order. So I like the way you phrased that. And I think that would be something that would be good to add into this. So Jim and others, do you feel comfortable with adding in, we will follow a modified version of Robert's Rules of Orders for decision making? Thumbs up from Jim. Corey and then Barry. Go ahead, Corey.
Okay. I just had a question about number 4, conflict of interest. And I was just wondering if you could give an example of maybe what that might entail.
From decisions that pose a conflict of interest. Okay.
So like, you know, I'm representing the FAC, but I work at DNR. So presumably there'll be a lot of content in this that would relate to public land management. If something comes to a vote on something that affects state land management, is that a conflict of interest? If I'm would I need to recuse myself from voting on something like that?
That's a really good question, and I'm thinking about it for a moment, as many of you are, you know, appointed because of your affiliation and experience with this topic on other fronts. Chris or Kathy, do you have an idea of an example, or perhaps we should rethink this language?
I mean, I saw Russ. I know Russ is a parliamentarian. I mean, my understanding, Corey, is that as long as there's no personal benefit to you, there's not a clear conflict of interest. I think if you do have some agency, you know, intersection, it would be valuable just to notify that. But I don't think you have to recuse yourself if there's not a personal gain to you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I appreciate the clarification.
Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I want to echo the what Chris said. Serving on the school board, a good example is we have had school board members who have a spouse who's a teacher. When it comes to voting on the teacher's contract, they recuse themselves because of that personal conflict of interest. So it's more directly related to your personal business, finance, that sort of thing than what agency you're working for yourself. Or if it's more, that's kind of a nuance, but that I hopefully helps explain it.
That's a very helpful example, Russ. Thank you for sharing that. Does that answer the question, Corey?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
So yeah, I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like that's the proper interpretation, and also I support the changes, the clarifications that everyone's provided so far. And I can't seem to find the reaction button. There used to be a reaction button on the bottom. Is it under something? Is it under something?
We don't have it in this meeting format, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know, unfortunately.
That's okay.
But you're not missing it.
Thank you.
Okay. So with those proposed changes, and Kate, chime in if I'm missing any, but with the reframing of subcommittee participation to a suggestion as opposed to being mandatory, and with the addition of the following a modified version of Robert's Rules of Orders for voting procedures and general meeting protocol. Was there any other specific changes other than those two? I believe those were the two. So with those changes, if you approve these rules and procedures, please raise your hand.
This is Carl, and I think we also talked about changing it so everybody doesn't have to be on a subcommittee if there's only one subcommittee.
That's right. And so I think, Carl, that's addressed by making subcommittee participation not mandatory.
Yeah, the should and shall probably
Yeah.
took care of that.
Yeah, do you agree?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay. I see 10 hands, which is over a majority. So rules and procedures approved with those changes. We'll send an updated version with those changes so that you can all see it. And we will circulate that around. Thank you all. I appreciate your attention to detail. We are now going to move on to electing the task force chair. So I will kick this off by asking if anyone has someone that they would like to nominate. And I'm not sure if these hands are raised or from approving the rules of orders or for a nomination. So it looks like Russ's hand is new. So go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I would like to nominate Carl Weimer. I think Carl served very ably on the Whatcom County Council, including, if I remember right, a stint as chair. And so I think that background would serve us well.
Thank you, Russ. Carl?
Well, in an attempt to get out of that, I would like to nominate Chris Elder. I think he's been doing this for years, has thought a lot about this. He gets paid to be part of these things, and it might be better off having somebody that can devote that type of time and expertise than myself, who's kind of a volunteer that kind of got drug into this by the Parks Commission.
Thank you, Carl. Any other?
I guess I would also support Chris too. So either one.
Okay. Are there any other different nominations? Do we have a second? Yes, Russ, would you like to consider that your second to the nomination of Chris Elder?
Yeah, yes, I think if Carl is attempting to withdraw, then I will second Chris's nomination.
Okay.
I would accept the nomination if Carl would consider being the vice chair.
I could do that.
Okay. Well, are we ready to put it to a vote? All in favor of Chris Elder as task force chair, raise your hand. I see 10 hands. That's a majority. All right. Approved. Congratulations, Chris.
Yeah, appreciate the vote of confidence, everyone, and I'll certainly do my best to keep us on track.
Excellent. Well,
Hey.
thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you heard you saying something. All right. Well, thank you all for helping me do the work of keeping us on time. What I would like to do next is, oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna step back a second because we confirmed Chris, but I'd like to just formally confirm Carl as vice chair. So all in favor of Carl as our task force vice chair, raise your hand. Okay, 10 hands again, 11 hands. Okay.
And keep your hands up for me, folks, for just 1 second while Melanie continues.
Yes. Kate is diligently keeping track of things for us. Let me know when you're ready, Kate, and I'll move us on. Okay,
All right.
thank you. Go ahead and lower your hands. Okay, I am going to shift us now into talking about our work plan and our path forward. We have just under 30 minutes left together, and I know, you know, there's a lot to talk about, and we're all really excited to get into the nitty-gritty of this. So I ask you just to bear with me as we go through this, and know that we're still thinking a little bit big picture, but I promise we'll have plenty of opportunity to dive into things more specifically. So I'm looking forward to more great discussion with you all, and just know that this is still going to be a little bit high level, but I promise that we are getting there. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of work to do. And to make this a little bit easier to digest, I have kept this schedule focused on 2024, and we'll plan out more details into 2025 as we get closer to the end of the year. So just know, you know, January through August in there it looks really condensed. We'll have much more detail laid out, but I just want to keep everybody focused and focus on the first part of this process through the end of this year to begin with. So in this schedule, we have our strategic approach to ensuring a collaborative process laid out on the top. And I'm going to come back to this in a little bit more detail when we talk about your homework assignment before the next meeting. But this basic process, and if you've taken part in strategic planning or anything like that in the past, you may have gone through something similar. But it starts out by setting our goals. And from there, we define our objectives. You might sometimes hear this as, you know, strategies. And then we identify the critical threats. And from there, we identify our actions. So those are the more specific actions that we'll propose in the plan. And then all of this gets baked into the final plan. So this is our overall approach that we're following. And a majority of this is taking place this year, right? And then next year we'll be focused on piecing this all together into the plan. So other key milestones and processes that are happening on this schedule. We have 12-ish meetings. There's a little bit of wiggle room there, but we're planning on 12 meetings as a full group. The first of which is today. And then the plan is to meet about monthly through August of next year. And I'll talk more about this, but we'll be working with you all to understand your availability so that we have as many people as possible attending these meetings. As we discussed with subcommittees, which is not on this work plan schedule, that's where a bulk of the work will be taking place, right? And so we are convening at these meetings to make key decisions and to share out key outcomes from the subcommittee meetings. So we'll be really efficient with our time together as a full group. So eventually those subcommittee meetings will get peppered into this schedule. And the forming of subcommittees will be the focus of our next meeting when we're all together. So when we reviewed the code, the other really important piece of this is to make sure that we're including community values for publicly owned forest lands, and also including a framework for engagement and coordination. And so this tribal stakeholder and public engagement piece is happening throughout the end of this year as well. I'll talk a little bit more about what we, Triangle, the consultant group, is planning on doing over the next few weeks when we talk about your homework assignment, but we'll be working on a situational assessment to reach out to folks and gather input. And I'll get into more details of that when I talk more about the homework assignment. But so everything in green is related to engagement work. The blue pieces are the specific development of the plan. So developing our outline, doing the background research, data collection, policy review, developing a draft, and then carrying it over the finish line in September. And then those purple squares are kind of our key checkpoints throughout this process. This is when we'll be presenting status updates to County Council. So the key piece for you all to remember, to consider, I guess, when you see those squares, are we'll be working towards having the plan at reaching certain milestones with the plan in order to present those updates to County Council. So that's the key relevance of those dates for this group. As I mentioned, I'm going to get more into the specifics of this strategic approach, but are there any questions or comments on this timeline? Not seeing any hands. Okay. So I want to talk more about goals, objectives, threats, and actions. And the homework assignment for you all before we meet again is for you all to draft 1 or 2 goals to bring forward to our next meeting for discussion. And I want you all to think about how the goals and objectives and threats and actions interplay so that you can understand the way that we're looking at goals. So the goals are what we hope to achieve. So what the plan is intended to accomplish. And this really sets the foundation, right, for the actions that we will identify that get into these specifics. So the goals are the bigger picture, the what we hope to achieve at the end of this process, or what the plan hopes to achieve. Then our objectives are, how are we defining success? So these are based on our targets, and they have more measurable indicators. So they're linking the goals and the actions. Then when we think about threats, what are we trying to address in order to meet our objectives? So what are the sources of the threats? What are the things that are potentially standing in the way? And then our actions are specifically how we are addressing those threats. So the tendency is to sometimes jump all the way to the actions, especially when you're thinking about these things on a really deep level. And so the tricky part is zooming out at the onset of this to really think about the final destination, right? So what is the goal? So I find it helpful to sometimes boil this down really simply. So the target here, the goal is, what do we want to achieve? The objectives are how we will achieve it. The threats are, what do we need to overcome in order to achieve it? And then what specific actions will we take to overcome those threats and achieve the goal? Sometimes it's helpful to look at an example on a topic that's totally different than what we are all immersed in. So say the goal is to complete a marathon. I want to complete a marathon in September of 2025, right? That's our deadline. So I stuck to it. So my objective or my strategy is I'm going to develop and execute this running training program. What are the threats? Well, I could get injured, right? I've never run a marathon before. Maybe my body can't handle it. So my specific actions are, I'm going to work up to this. First, I'm going to complete a 5K in November. Here's my first specific action to address that threat and achieve my goal. Second action, I'm going to run a half marathon in March. So then I'm on track, have my actions, have my objective, reach my goal, complete the marathon. Does anyone have any questions about goals? Focusing more on the goals, but it's important to understand the distinction between the goals and the threats and the actions. So any questions? Is this making sense to folks? Jim, I see your comment in the chat. I'm happy that this is resonating with you. Yes. Stephen, or am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, yeah, that's
Yes.
right. I'm very sorry. I was thinking this was tomorrow the whole time. So I want to apologize to other members. I'll introduce myself very briefly. Steve Harrell, I'm the vice chair of the County Climate Impacts Advisory Committee, and I'm retired from a professorship at UW, which included a position in the School of Environmental and Forest Sciences. And so I am, as I say, I'm again very sorry, and I hope I can get these slides and catch up on what was going on. I am actually very interested in this. As I say, I thought it was tomorrow. So very sorry about that.
Thank you for being here, Stephen. And yes, we will share a recording of this so that you can catch up on the beginning. And apologies, I didn't see you join and should have flagged you to introduce yourself. But thank you so much for doing that and for coming on screen. And yeah, we'll make sure that you get caught up for our next meeting.
Okay.
Go ahead, yeah. Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Russ.
Yes, Melanie, for efficiency on compiling these goals, are you going to suggest that that we submit our 1 or 2 goals in writing prior to our next meeting so that we can have a packet that we can all look at?
That's a great suggestion, Russ. I will I think we'll have plenty of time to do that. And Kate is going to be sending out written instructions. And so in those written instructions, I'll provide some clear guidance on the deadline and how to submit. And I like your suggestion of having everybody do that in advance of the meeting so that we can see what folks have shared. We will be doing the work of creating our collective goals as a task force at our next meeting. So there won't be any further assignment for you all other than to submit them to me and perhaps review others, but we'll be doing the work of coming to agreement on our goals at the next meeting. So to just wrap up the assignment more completely, I want to remind everybody of what is laid out in the code and just ensure that as you are thinking about goals that resonate with you, that we are also referencing what is laid out in the code as well. So I would call these kind of like the goals as laid out in the code, right? And this is not to say that this is exactly what the goals that we come up with will be, you know, they won't be written in exactly this way, but I think this is really important for us to remind ourselves of as we are drafting our goals. So I wanted to put this back up on the screen. And again, just to reiterate the assignment is for you all to draft 1 or 2. And then this is a large group. We will not have, you know, if everyone comes up with 2, we're not going to have over 20 goals, but there will be a lot of overlap and similarities. And so the work at the next meeting is to then find the common themes, work on the phrasing, and come to collective agreement that represents the ideas that everyone brings forth. So does anyone have any questions about the assignment or just this process or the goal strategy, the goals, objectives, actions, threats in general? Any comments, any questions? Okay. And like I said, we'll send out some written instructions, so you don't have to remember this exactly. I'm going to briefly talk through the other two pieces of homework that we have for you all, and then we're going to shift to public comment. So I mentioned that we have an engagement process happening simultaneously, and we have a draft list of interviewees that we would like to contact for assessment interviews, what we call assessment interviews, to gain some insight into thoughts on this process and forest resilience as a whole. And what we'd like to do is send this list to you and hear if you have any strong feelings about recommendations for people who are not on this list that we should be contacting. And I just would like to emphasize that, you know, we're looking for just strong recommendations. We're limited in the number of people that we can contact. So we're hoping that we've captured most people, but if you have really strong feelings about people who are not included on this list, we want to hear that from you. And then the last piece of homework for you all is, in the spirit of scheduling, we will be sending out a survey so that we can better understand everybody's availability and work really hard on finding a date for the next meeting that works for as many of you as possible. So those are the three pieces of homework. Jim, I see your hand.
Just a question on one of the topics we were supposed to deal with this meeting, or at least comment on based on the Gantt chart, was tribal involvement. And I don't see us having a tribal representative. And we didn't talk about this.
Thank you, Jim. So we have two vacancies, and that's from the Nooksack Indian Tribe and Lummi Nation. And we have sent letters and have followed up with a phone call as well to attempt to recruit a representative to fill those vacancies. We have not yet had success. We are, so the apologies if that schedule is confusing. The idea was not to have the engagement pieces focused on during this meeting. The engagement is happening simultaneously. So that's something that Triangle, myself, and Kate and our team are working with County Council on, is A, trying to fill the vacancies on this task force, and then B, working on engagement in other ways if that is the path that is most desired by the tribes, is seeking input in other ways if participating in this task force is not the most appropriate or desirable way to participate. Does that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Russ?
Yeah, am I correct that you also have a vacancy for another trust beneficiary? I thought it said 2.
I believe that is the case because there was some last minute shifting on that front. Chris, do you know the status of that?
I do not. Kathy might have a better better line on that than I do.
Yeah. Hi, Kathy Halka with the council office. We've posted the vacancy and there's been some social media posting to try to generate some interest in that position, but it is vacant and we're hoping that someone will come forward to fill that position in the future. Once
Yeah,
we receive an
I-
application, it would go to council for the normal appointment process.
I will check with Tom Smith, who's commissioner from Whatcom County Fire District 16, which is a trust beneficiary. He's a retired DNR and also serves on the State Wildland Fire Advisory Committee. So he's got a lot of background in this area. So I'll talk with Tom and see if he is willing to submit an application. I would heartily recommend him as well as anyone, I'm sure, who's worked with him.
Thank you, Russ. Corey?
Yeah, I would just I would just say also, to be clear, Tom he's a wealth of knowledge. He worked in forest practices for a long time. He did state land management, and a good portion of his career was with our forest fire response with wildfire division, working out of Northwest region. And he's just a local. He's been in Whatcom County for most of his, if not, I think 30 plus years. So he's definitely a wealth of knowledge. So he'd be pretty helpful.
Thanks, Corey. Carl?
Yeah, just a quick question perhaps about the process. I know the county is about to formalize a contract along with the city of Bellingham to create a forest management plan. Is this task force supposed to inform that plan, or is that effort informing this task force? Are those two different things going different directions?
They're two different things, and hopefully they're going in the same direction.
Yeah, and I'll just say part of our work is this coordination, right? And ensuring that we're reviewing other processes and plans and recommendations, both completed and in process.
Thank you.
So I am going to, we've got about 5 minutes left of our meeting. For anyone on the call with public comments, I am available after this meeting to stay on. So in case we do go a little bit over time and folks have to hop off, just for task force members to to wrap up and be sure you're clear about next steps. Kate will be following up in an email with clear instructions for homework assignments before our next meeting. So look out for that email. One of us will, or we'll be sure that you get calendar invites for our future meetings after we get your availability. So hoping for your input on most of these assignments by the end of this week so that we can get things on the books and keep things moving along. Jim, is this a new hand? Or you're on mute?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't bring it down.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, excellent. And David, I see your comment in the chat. That's a great suggestion to add to the agenda, a future agenda. So I'm going to turn to the audience and ask if there is anyone who would like to make a public comment. Resources. Yep. Go ahead, resources.
Hi there. Thanks, Melanie. Hi, my name is Kaya Hayes. I'm the Land and Water Policy Manager for Resources, a local environmental education and advocacy nonprofit working here in Whatcom and Skagit counties. We have a broad scope of work, but that includes watershed health and climate resilience and land use. So we're really excited to have the expertise and perspectives of the Forest Resilience Task Force, coming on the scene to enrich these important conversations moving forward. I just had 2 items that I wanted to bring up quickly with the task force. One, I was hoping to get a little bit of clarification regarding some of the remaining vacancies. So far, what we've seen is just that the one vacancy posted is a community member with expertise in climate, salmon recovery, and natural resource policy. Is it then sounding like there's also an additional trust beneficiary position that will be posted?
Kai, thank you so much for that question. I believe that the one vacancy we had was filled and then someone left the position, and apologies, I'm just refreshing my memory on the
Melanie,
status
that
of
would've- Sorry, that would have been Alex
right,
Harris
which
from Resources.
and
Yeah.
that was the expertise in climate, salmon recovery, and natural resources policy.
Okay,
Correct.
so to clarify,
Correct.
that position is still vacant and is just pending submissions of applications to be reviewed by council?
That is the current vacant position. Yes.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. And then just quickly, the second item I wanted to bring to the attention of the task force. I know you're still early on in the game in terms of getting scope and goals outlined and getting a clear sense of how you'll engage with other planning processes ongoing. But I just wanted to bring to light that the Lake Whatcom Planning Group is in the process of developing their 5-year work plan for the watershed. And for the 2025 to 2030 period, there are 2 new program areas included in the plan: climate impacts and forest management. And so Water Resources Advisory Board and Climate Impacts Advisory Committee are going to be getting a presentations on this first draft released last week, and we'll be submitting inputs in advance of the public comment period and final draft review in September. And I wanted to encourage the Forest Task Force to consider how they might be able to incorporate reviewing and providing feedback, you know, given sort of the short timeline and the fact that you are also sort of getting up and running off the ground. But I think that these are, this is an incredibly valuable opportunity and sort of exactly well tailored to the purpose of the task force and the expertise that you have. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Kai. Thank you very much for the comment and suggestions. Stephen?
Yeah, Kai, can I ask you, you mentioned that the Climate Impacts Advisory Committee is going to be providing comments. Have you sent us anything about the what we're supposed to be providing comments on? Because our meeting is this Thursday evening, and it would be nice if we knew if we need to put this on the agenda at the last minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it was Councilmember Galloway that suggested that SEAC be included in the round of presentations. So I will follow up and be sure that that communication has been pushed along.
Yeah, I have no authority to say anything here because I almost skipped this meeting, but as soon as you could, that would be great.
Great. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kai. Is there anyone else in the audience that has a public comment they'd like to share? Not seeing any others. Well, thank you all so much. It is 12:32. I'm just going to share my screen with the homework assignment one more time, but know that you will get more specific details on all of this in writing in your inbox. But I forgot I created this handy slide so that you know you have 1, 2, 3 things that you need to do for us before our next meeting. It has been such a pleasure meeting you all virtually. I know is not the best, but I appreciate you all having your screens on and engaging and raising your hands and actively participating. So thank you all so much for a great first meeting. And I really look forward to seeing you all at the next one. So take good care, enjoy the rest of July, and we will be chatting in the inboxes and maybe seeing each other around recreating. Any final questions or thoughts before I adjourn us? All right. Well, meeting adjourned, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.